The smell of bleach never leaves. It clings to my hands, seeps into my uniform, lingers in my hair no matter how many times I wash it. I've tried every soap, every lotion, every trick the other night shift ladies swear by, but it's useless. The bleach stays, sharp and sour, a reminder of every aisle I've scrubbed under the buzzing lights of the Walmart Supercenter on Maple Avenue. That night was no different. Past midnight, the store had gone quiet, customers long gone, leaving only the echoes of our carts rattling against the linoleum. I was crouched in the cereal aisle, scrubbing a spill that had hardened into sticky patches. Corn syrup, maybe, or something worse. My knees ached in protest, but pain is like background noise after a while. You learn to live with it. Linda, you missed a spot. The voice came from behind me. It belonged to Mark, the assistant manager, a kid barely old enough to rent a car. He tossed me a rag without looking. I caught it with hands already cracked and raw from hot water and cleaning chemicals. I'll get it, I said. He was already gone, off to scold someone else. By the time I clocked out, it was nearly 3 in the morning. I hung up my blue vest in the break room, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside into the sharp March wind. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered under the buzzing lamps. My bus wouldn't arrive for another 20 minutes, so I pulled my coat tighter and waited, my breath clouding in front of me. The ride home was quiet. Just me, a couple of factory workers, and a man snoring so loudly the driver had to nudge him awake before his stop. When we reached my neighborhood, I got off, walking the last 3 blocks home with my shoes dangling from one hand. It was easier that way, my arches throbbed too much to keep them on. I prayed the porch light was still working as I approached the little house. It flickered, then steadied, casting a pale glow on the peeling paint of the front door. Inside, the house was cold, the furnace fighting a losing battle against the wind that slipped through the old window frames. I set my shoes by the door, shrugged off my coat, and stood for a moment in the silence. Then I saw it, a folded paper pinned to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. My eyes went straight to the numbers. $2,850. Tuition, housing, meal plan. Paid in full. Due again in 3 months. Daniel's tuition. I boiled some water for tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at that paper. It always felt heavier than it looked. Every shift, every sore muscle, every night I came home smelling like bleach, it all pointed back to that one piece of paper. His future. His escape. His chance to be more than the son of a Walmart janitor. I sipped my tea slowly, trying not to think about how my hands trembled holding the cup. By the time I finally crawled into bed, the sky was already softening toward morning. Sleep came in fragments, broken by the throbbing in my knees. When I woke, Daniel was home. His spring break had started, and he'd let himself in with the spare key. I found him in the kitchen, tall and lanky, wearing that college hoodie I'd saved up for last Christmas. His hair was longer than before, curling at the edges, and his face had filled out. He looked older. Grown. Morning, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. He looked up from his phone, barely glancing at me. You just got in from work? Yeah. Double shift. I reached for a coffee mug. He frowned, that little wrinkle between his eyebrows tightening. The one that always meant disappointment. Mom, can't you get a real job? The words hit harder than I expected. Not because I hadn't heard them before, I had, from strangers, from customers, even from my own thoughts in the quiet hours of the night. But never from him. Never from the boy I'd carried through everything. I set the mug down carefully, afraid my hands would shake too much if I tried to pour. Daniel. No, I mean it, he said, leaning back in the chair. You're killing yourself working nights at Walmart. Stocking shelves, scrubbing floors. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing. I didn't answer right away. The words I wanted to say crowded in my throat, but none of them seemed right. None of them sounded like the words a mother should use. Instead, I walked over to the fridge, pulled the tuition receipt off the door, folded it in half, and slipped it into my purse. "Where are you going?" he asked, confused by my silence. "To the office," I said, slipping on my coat. "What office?" "The one that takes tuition payments." He blinked at me, but I didn't wait for him to speak again. I stepped outside into the wind, the morning sun glaring too brightly for March. At the bus stop, I clutched the folded paper in my hand. The edges dug into my palm, sharp enough to sting. I didn't loosen my grip. The bus carried me past the Walmart, past the gas stations and payday loan stores, past the bakery Daniel used to love when he was little. I remembered his smile back then, sticky with frosting, his laughter filling the air. That memory ached now, heavy and bittersweet. By the time I stepped off the bus downtown, the clouds had started to roll in, low and heavy. The bursar's office was quiet when I walked in. A woman behind the glass window smiled politely. She recognized me. I'd been there before. "I need to cancel future payments," I said, my voice steady. She blinked. "For who?" "My son. Daniel Carter. Sophomore, engineering." "All payments?" she asked carefully. "Yes. Effective immediately." She hesitated. "There's a deposit pending for next term. Housing, meal plan, books." "Do you want to cancel it all?" I interrupted. Her eyes softened. "You'll lose the priority registration benefits. Housing might not." "I understand." I unfolded the paper from my purse, signed the back, and slid it under the glass. By the time I stepped back onto the sidewalk, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I walked into the bakery on Jefferson, the one Daniel used to beg me to stop at after school. I ordered a slice of lemon pie, sat at the corner table, and ate it slowly with a flimsy plastic fork. Each bite was sharp and sweet, cutting through the dull ache in my chest. For 21 years, I had been everything to that boy: nurse, banker, cook, cheerleader, janitor. I had scrubbed floors and toilets and now Walmart aisles so he could sit in clean classrooms, wear new hoodies, live in a dorm with working heat. And now, finally, I was done pretending that was enough for him. That night, I didn't go to work. I turned off my phone, sat at the kitchen table, and waited for something in me to snap back into place. It didn't. But something else did. Something better. When Daniel was born, I was 30 and already tired. Not from him, never from him, but from the world. From bills that stacked up faster than I could pay them. From a husband who thought punching a clock at the factory gave him the right to spend his nights drinking with friends instead of helping with the baby. From a house too drafty in winter and too hot in summer, a place that felt like it was constantly one leak away from collapse. Back then, I believed in keeping things together. I believed in the picture of a family, even if the frame was cracked. So I stayed with Tom longer than I should have. I let him dismiss me when I was too exhausted to keep the baby from crying. I forgave him when he disappeared for nights at a time and came back smelling of whiskey and smoke. I told myself Daniel needed a full house, even if half of it was broken. But broken glass cuts, and eventually, I bled too much to keep pretending. When Daniel was 7, Tom left for good. He packed his things into 2 garbage bags and slammed the door so hard the picture of Daniel's kindergarten class fell off the wall. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead, I felt something close to relief. The house was quiet, and in that quiet I realized how long I'd been holding my breath. I had $250 in the bank, a half tank of gas, and a little boy who looked at me with wide brown eyes that asked questions I couldn't answer. We stayed in that 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town, the one where the furnace barely worked, and the floor sloped toward the kitchen sink. It wasn't much, but it was ours. From then on, it was just me and Daniel. And I made a rule: no pride, no panic, no complaints. Just get through the day, then the next, and the next after that. I took every job I could find. Cleaning houses, folding clothes at the laundromat, babysitting other people's kids while Daniel colored in the corner. At night, I'd wash my hands in the sink, cracked from bleach and dish soap, and watch him sleeping on the couch, wondering how long I could keep the act going, the act that said I had it under control. There wasn't time to think about dreams. There was only money, or the lack of it. When Daniel was 10, he brought home a test with a perfect score in math. His teacher called me in, sat across from me with a big smile, and said, "Your son is gifted, Mrs. Carter. He's got something special." I smiled back, but inside, my chest ached. Because special meant more books, more fees, more programs I couldn't afford. Special was expensive. But I found a way. I always found a way. I picked up extra shifts, scrubbed office bathrooms downtown on Sundays, and walked home with pepper spray clenched in my fist just in case. Daniel never knew. I never told him. In high school, he started staying late at the library. He was polite, well-spoken. Teachers loved him. They'd say, "He must come from such a good home." I'd smile and nod, even when my shoes were splitting at the seams and I couldn't afford a doctor for the infection creeping up my gums. By senior year, he was applying to colleges I couldn't even pronounce. And when the acceptance letters came, 3 of them, all glowing, all congratulatory, I cried. Not in front of him, but in the bathroom with the faucet running. He chose the State University downtown. Close enough for me to visit, far enough for him to pretend he was from somewhere else. I remember the day we toured the campus. He walked ahead, pointing out the labs, the quad, the fountain. I followed behind, proud and aching. We sat on a bench outside the admissions office while he scrolled his phone. "Mom," he said, eyes wide. "They gave me a partial scholarship. Almost half the tuition." Almost. I smiled. "We'll figure it out." I didn't tell him that meant canceling my car insurance or selling the ring Tom left behind. I didn't tell him I was going to pick up a night shift at Walmart because they offered $1 more than my cleaning job. I hugged him in the parking lot on move-in day, his new t-shirt smelling of fabric softener. "Call me if you need anything," I said. "I will," he replied, distracted, already watching other students toss a football near the fountain. I sat in the car long after he walked away, my hands tight around the steering wheel, watching students drift across campus like bright fish in clear water. I wondered if any of their mothers were scrubbing toilets to buy their kids laptops. I started at Walmart that fall. Graveyard shift. Stocking shelves, mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms. It paid a little better than the last job and gave me enough hours to cover Daniel's rent and books. I told them I preferred nights, fewer customers, less fuss, but the truth was, nights let me disappear. I could cry in the supply closet if I needed to. Nobody would hear. Once, in November, I dropped off a care package at his dorm. Granola bars, cough syrup, new socks. I left it with the RA so I wouldn't embarrass him. That night, I got a text. "Thanks. Didn't have to." No heart, no smiley face. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Not because it hurt, but because it made me feel smaller than I wanted to feel. I told myself it was a phase, that growing up meant pulling away. But the further he pulled, the more I wondered if the boy who used to climb into my lap with storybooks had disappeared for good. The weeks between his calls stretched longer. His visits home were shorter. When he did come, he looked around the house like it embarrassed him. Once he asked, "Mom, why don't you move somewhere better?" I laughed. With what money, Daniel? He looked away, irritated. That was the first time I realized he might have forgotten. Forgotten the nights I skipped dinner so he could eat. Forgotten the mornings I walked him to school with holes in my shoes. Forgotten the time I stayed up sewing his prom suit because we couldn't afford a new one. But I excused it. I always excused it. Stress, college pressure, growing pains. Until the day he said it out loud. Can't you get a real job, Mom? Real. As if the blisters on my hands were imaginary. As if the paychecks that kept his dorm lights on were pretend. As if waking up at 4 p.m. to start a night shift wasn't real enough. I didn't cry when he said it. I didn't even flinch. But I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw him, not as my boy, not as my baby, but as a man who couldn't see me anymore. A man who looked at me and saw not sacrifice, not love, but failure. That was the end of something. Not of my love, that doesn't end. But of my silence. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of Walmart pay stubs tucked neatly in an envelope. 20 years of receipts. Rent, groceries, tuition, books. A staircase I'd built dollar by dollar, hoping he'd climb it to something better. And suddenly I asked myself, for what? For what had I scrubbed the gum off shopping carts? For what had I mopped up spills until my back screamed? For what had I skipped my own dentist appointments, my own meals, my own rest? I told myself I was investing. But it wasn't in his future. Not really. It was in love. In being loved back. And now, at 61, I realized I'd been paying for something that should have been free. The silence in the house that night wasn't peaceful. It pressed against my chest, heavy and unrelenting. But underneath it, something stirred. A small voice I hadn't heard in decades. My own. And it whispered, enough. The bank lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and coffee, the kind brewed too long in a machine that should have been replaced years ago. I'd been coming here for so long the tellers knew me by name, even if they didn't know the whole story behind each deposit, each withdrawal, each carefully balanced transaction that kept my son's world afloat. Carol, the branch manager, greeted me with her usual warm smile. She was about my age, with gray streaks in her hair she never bothered to cover. Morning, Linda. Here for the tuition transfer again? Not this time, I said, sliding into the chair across from her desk. Her eyebrows lifted, but she didn't say anything, just waited. I need to stop all the automatic payments to my son's school. Tuition, housing, meal plan. Everything. Carol blinked, leaning back in her chair. Are you sure? There's a deposit pending for next semester. Cancel it, I said, steady. You'll lose priority benefits. He could lose his housing assignment. I understand. Carol studied me for a long moment. She'd seen me walk into this bank for years, paycheck stubs folded neatly in an envelope, transferring money without hesitation. Maybe she'd guessed the toll. Maybe not. But she didn't argue. Instead, she pulled up the account. Where would you like the refunded balance transferred? To me, I said. Then, after a pause, actually. I want to open a new account. A trust account. Carol tilted her head. In whose name? My goddaughter. Emily Ross. She's 17. Wants to study nursing. Carol smiled faintly, typing into her computer. That's a good reason. By the time I left the bank, the paperwork was signed, the trust opened. I held the folder in my hands like a passport to a country I hadn't realized I could visit. A place where my labor meant more than survival, more than tuition receipts. It meant choice. From the bank, I went straight to Mr. Hammond's office. He was a lawyer who'd handled my will years ago, a man with thinning hair and a voice that carried the calm of someone who'd seen it all. "Linda," he said warmly when I walked in. "What brings you in today?" "I need to update my will," I said, placing my binder on his desk. "And the beneficiary list." He adjusted his glasses, flipping open the folder. "Still leaving everything to your son?" "No," my voice didn't waver. "Not anymore." He didn't ask why. That's why I liked him. "I want to name Emily Ross. With a trust provision. If anything happens to me, she'll have something to help her get through school. And if not her, then the community scholarship fund downtown." He nodded. "Understood." When I left his office, the sun had slipped behind clouds. The air carried the bite of late winter, but I felt lighter than I had in years. That evening, I came home to find Daniel sitting at the kitchen table. Same place as always, his shoulders tense, his jaw set. "Mom," he said as soon as I walked in, "I got an email from the bursar's office. They said the payments have been reversed." My dorm fees bounced. What the hell is going on? I set my purse on the counter, keeping my movements calm. "I canceled them." His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. "You what?" "I canceled the payments." "Jesus, Mom, are you trying to ruin my life?" His voice was sharp, panicked. I almost laughed. Ruin his life. I'd spent mine building his. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar, until there was nothing left of me. "You'll need to talk to the financial aid office," I said evenly. "Maybe they can help." He scoffed. "Like they're just going to hand me $8,000? I can't afford that. I'll lose my housing, my classes, everything." "Then you might need to work," I replied quietly. "I can't do both. School and a job. I'll fall behind." I met his eyes. "I know it's hard. I've done it." For a moment, his mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but then he shut it. The silence ticked, heavy, filled only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. "You said you'd help me finish college," he muttered. "I said I'd support you. And I have. But support isn't the same as surrender." His hands clenched into fists. "You don't get it, Mom. College isn't like it was in your day. Everything's competitive. Everyone else's parents can pay. They don't have to worry about stupid things like rent." My voice stayed calm, but there was steel in it. "You think I don't know what it's like to be looked down on? To be laughed at when I clean? To have customers toss trash at my feet? To scrub floors until my back burns while people call me invisible? I know disrespect, Daniel. But none of it cuts as deep as when it comes from your own child." He froze. We stood there, two people who had once been everything to each other, now separated by silence so wide it felt like a canyon. Finally, I turned away. "I've got work tonight." "You're still going in?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes," I said. "Because I don't quit when things get uncomfortable." I climbed the stairs, each step aching in my knees, but I didn't stop. That night, I didn't go to work. I called Mark at 5:30, told him I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't a lie. I was unwell in a way that had no name, a heaviness under my skin like a bruise waiting to surface. "Rest up," he said gruffly. "We'll manage." I sat at the kitchen table instead, the space Daniel had left empty when he stormed out. His chair was still pulled out, and I stared at it for a long time. In the drawer beside me was an envelope labeled Education, Daniel. Inside were neat stacks of receipts, transfer slips, photocopies of payments made. A ledger of sacrifice. It wasn't the amount that stunned me. I knew it by heart. It was the consistency. Every month, like clockwork, I'd given away another piece of myself. Rent, food, tuition, books, extras. One after another, like I was building a staircase out of money, hoping one day he'd use it to come back to me. And now I had to ask myself, for what? For what had I folded my body over a mop bucket until my spine screamed? For what had I walked home in the dark, praying every stranger stayed a stranger? For what had I skipped birthday cakes, vacations, even new clothes, so he could live in comfort? I told myself it was for love. But love shouldn't feel like bleeding. The next afternoon, Emily showed up with a casserole dish in her arms. She didn't knock, she just tapped on the screen door and let herself in. Mom made lasagna, she said, setting it down on the counter. She said you'd been working too hard to cook. I hadn't told her anything, but somehow she always knew. You didn't have to, I said softly. I wanted to. She smiled. Besides, I need your opinion on my college essay. We sat at the kitchen table, the casserole steaming between us, while she read her draft aloud. She wrote about wanting to be a nurse, about taking care of her grandmother when no one else would. Her words were raw, real, unpolished. And they made my eyes sting. Emily, I said when she finished, you're going to make a damn good nurse. Her cheeks flushed. You really think so? I know so. I didn't tell her then about the trust. About the money I'd redirected into her name. That would come later. For now, it was enough to see her gratitude, her respect, her kindness that never demanded a receipt. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't invisible. Daniel called that night. His voice was sharp, panicked. Mom, what are you doing? They're threatening to kick me out of the dorms. You'll figure it out, I said calmly. Plenty of students work part-time. Plenty take loans. I thought you didn't want me in debt. I didn't. But I also didn't plan on being humiliated in my own kitchen. Things change. Silence stretched across the line. I was frustrated, he said finally, his voice cracking. I didn't mean it like that. You said enough, I replied. Not just with words, but with how you looked at me. Like I was small. Like I was less. I didn't. You did. And I believed you. His breath caught. So what now? You figure it out, I said. You're smart. You've got time, opportunity. You'll be fine. But I won't keep bleeding myself dry so you can pretend I don't exist. Silence again. Heavy. Unyielding. When I hung up, my hands trembled. Not from fear this time. From release. I wasn't his safety net anymore. I was me. The first morning I woke without an alarm clock, I didn't know what to do with myself. For years, my days had been ruled by shifts, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., or 10 p.m. to 7. Even when I had time off, my body stayed wired to that rhythm. But now, after calling in 2 nights in a row and telling Mark not to expect me back, the silence of the house stretched wide and unbroken. I made coffee. Real coffee, not the cheap instant packets I used to stir into a mug half asleep. I drank it slowly at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming across the wood, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a morning that belonged entirely to me. It felt like freedom. Not the loud kind people talk about, with fireworks and big gestures, but the quiet kind that slips in through the cracks when you finally put something heavy down. Emily came over that afternoon, carrying a Tupperware of cornbread. She dropped it on the counter with a grin. Mom made chili, she said. And it's a sin to eat chili without cornbread. I laughed, shaking my head. You're spoiling me. You deserve to be spoiled. We ate together at the kitchen table, cornbread crumbling under our fingers. I watched her chatter about her essay revisions, about the college recruiter who'd called her, about how nervous she was for her SAT scores to come in. She didn't notice the way my chest ached, not with sadness, but with something like hope. When we finished, I set down my fork. Emily, I said carefully, I want you to know. I set up a trust. In your name. The money I was using for Daniel's tuition, it's yours now. For school, or whatever future you want. Her eyes widened. What? No, Aunt Linda, I can't. You can. And you will. Because you've shown me more respect and love in 17 years than some people manage in a lifetime. Her voice broke. Why me? Because you see me, I said simply. Not just what I can give. You show up. That matters. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she wiped them quickly. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll use it well. Build something good. Be kind, but don't be a fool. If someone shows you they don't respect you, believe them. She nodded, her chin trembling. I promise. In that moment, watching her, I felt something shift inside me. For so long, I had poured everything into one vessel, one boy, hoping he'd carry my love forward. But love doesn't always return from where you send it. Sometimes it grows in unexpected places, like a plant sprouting from a crack in the sidewalk. Daniel didn't come around for days. He called, he texted, but I let the phone ring. I needed the silence. I needed the space. When he finally showed up, it was a Saturday afternoon. The knock at the door was sharp, impatient. I wiped flour from my hands, I'd been baking cinnamon rolls, and opened it. He stood there in his college hoodie and jeans, looking older somehow, and smaller at the same time. Hey, he said. Come in, I replied. He hovered near the kitchen table like he wasn't sure he was welcome. You've been avoiding me. I've been resting. I poured myself tea, not offering him any. He swallowed. I wanted to talk. Face to face. Then talk. He shifted, restless. I shouldn't have said what I said. About your job. About it not being real. I was ashamed. Of me? I asked. Of myself, he admitted, eyes dropping. That I couldn't take care of things on my own. That I needed you. And instead of owning that, I made you small. I stayed silent. If sincerity had weight, it could stand on its own. I'm sorry, he said finally. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. I didn't see you, Mom. Not really. I saw the things you did for me, but not you. I studied him. For the first time in years, I saw not the boy I'd raised, not the man who'd hurt me, but something in between. Someone struggling, stumbling, trying to find his way. I don't want to erase the past, I said quietly. But I also won't keep living in it. If you want a future with me in it, you'll have to treat me as a person. Not a wallet. Not a shadow. His shoulders sagged. Relief, not defeat. I want that. I really do. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then he looked up. Can I come by again? Just to visit. Not to ask for anything. Anytime, I said. But not as a project. As my son. As a person. His smile was faint, but real. Deal. Weeks passed. Emily brought over more essays, more cornbread, more pieces of her future. Daniel called sometimes, not for money, but just to talk, about a class, about the part-time job he'd picked up at the library, about nothing important at all. And for once, that was enough. I joined a Tai Chi class at the community center. At first, my knees protested every slow bend, every sway. But the instructor said, the goal isn't perfection. The goal is to come back. And I did. Every Tuesday morning, I moved with strangers who became friends, our bodies swaying like seaweed in water, our breath sinking until I felt almost young again. I started a notebook, not a bucket list, just a list of small things I wanted. Real sheets that didn't scratch. A pair of leather shoes that wouldn't blister. A trip to the botanical garden I hadn't visited in 20 years. None of it was extravagant. All of it was mine. And slowly, I began to believe I had the right to want things. One Sunday, the house was full again. Emily set the table, humming under her breath. Daniel fixed the wobble in the old armchair, a wrench in his hand, determination on his face. I stood at the stove, stirring soup, the smell of garlic and rosemary filling the air. It wasn't Thanksgiving. It wasn't a holiday. Just a Sunday. We ate together, soup, bread, apple pie I'd baked that morning. No speeches, no drama. Just the rhythm of spoons against bowls, Emily teasing Daniel about his haircut, Daniel asking her about nursing school. When the dishes were done, Daniel hugged me at the door. Not a quick, stiff hug, but a long one. His voice was quiet when he said, "I'm proud to be your son." And for the first time, I believed him. That night, I sat in the armchair he'd fixed, a blanket over my knees, the house humming with quiet. I thought of all the years I'd spent scrubbing floors, folding bills, waiting for a thank you that never came. I thought of how invisible I had felt, how small. And then I thought of Emily's promise. Of Daniel's arms around me. Of the Tai Chi class swaying like trees in the wind. Of the apple pie cooling on the counter. It wasn't wealth. It wasn't fame. It wasn't everything I deserved. But it was enough. Enough to sit in the dimming light and feel whole again. Enough to believe that the life I had left wasn't just survival. It was mine. And that was freedom. If this story resonates with you, do well to like, comment and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for listening.